Hey everyone, I'm Cody Turner with Presidium Group Solutions. We've decided to release a video in relation to the Jessica Paige Kemp case that we have. I've made multiple attempts, so has the family of Ms. Kemp, at trying to find out if Greene County has an active criminal investigation into her case or not. Both Greene County and the Second Judicial Prosecuting Attorney's Office has refused to even respond to any of our emails. So today, I'm going to be making this video about the report that was filed by the Greene County Sheriff's Office in relation to the Jessica Paige Kemp case. The case on this report is GCSO-P2501054. And I apologize if anybody can hear the road behind me. Also, not super experienced with doing videos. I don't have any of the cool TikTok microphones. So after rewatching this, I'll fix the audio if need be. Explaining this police report is kind of complicated. And the reason for that is because the date that it was generated versus the dates of the events that took place. So Jessica Paige Kemp was reported missing May 14th by her family in Jonesboro to the Jonesboro Police Department. There were multiple reasons why she was reported out of that jurisdiction. Once Jonesboro did their job, they entered her in as a missing persons. They got what was called a delayed hit. A delayed hit is when a law enforcement agency or any other government agency happens to have contact with someone who is reported missing, or maybe even a vehicle that is reported as missing or wanted. That system, the ACIC and CIC system, goes back a certain number of days, typically 30. I've seen them go back longer, and says, hey, this person that you're looking for was run for whatever reason by this agency over here. So when Jonesboro did their job, they found out that the Greene County Sheriff's Office had contact with Jessica Paige Kemp prior to her being reported missing. That contact was on the 5th of May, 2025. Here's what makes telling you guys about this report so complicated and raises some red flags. You may not be able to see it in the video, but I'm going to try to show you. The actual incident report was generated by Greene County Sheriff's Office on May 15th, 2025. 10 days after they'd had contact with Jessica Paige Kemp, and 1 day after she was officially reported missing to the Jonesboro Police Department. When Jonesboro realized that the last known contact with Jessica Paige Kemp was out of Greene County, they pulled her out of the NCIC missing persons profile and transferred that to the Greene County Sheriff's Office. In some places you'll hear that they transferred it to Paragould, but essentially it is within the county of Greene County. That's not really, it's not necessarily an uncommon thing to do, and it kind of just helps align jurisdictions. So I don't believe that there was anything done wrong on that. The question does become, how long was she pulled out of that system before she was placed back in by the Greene County Sheriff's Office? Because in order to place an adult into that system, you have to have an incident report generated for missing persons. So that would explain why on the 15th, they decided to finally do an incident report. The other thing that makes this report so complicated is the first narrative is done by Sergeant Colby Drope of the Greene County Sheriff's Office in relation to his incident that involved Jessica Paige Kemp's campsite at Lake Ashball. That was May 9th. There are two other supplemental narratives. One, two, that were done by two other individuals that work for the Greene County Sheriff's Office. The way a supplemental narrative works is if an officer goes out to a call for service or has some type of event and another officer is involved, it is expected that the second, third, fourth, however many officers that responded to the original event also do supplemental narratives. Why it's a problem in this case is because the narratives that I'm about to read you should have been, if nothing else, their own information reports. So I'm going to read you the narratives as they are on this paper. And trust me, because of the dates, it gets confusing. But then I'll put those in chronological order, which will make a lot more sense. So the first narrative of this report that was created on May 15th, 2025, again is by Sergeant Colby Drope. And it reads the following. On May 9th, 2025, Greene County deputies were dispatched to check the campground at Lake Ashball. The request came from a Randolph County Sheriff's deputy who had been informed by a citizen about a suspicious vehicle in a disrupted campsite. It should be noted that deputies had prior information regarding the individual occupying the campsite, as Deputy Brian Tillman had made contact with Jessica Kemp during a call for service on May 5th, 2025. Upon arrival, deputies found a passenger car parked in front of a tent with all of its doors open and various items scattered around the campsite. While walking the area, deputies noticed that the tent's entrance was partially open. Deputies looked inside the tent while standing outside of it and did not observe anyone inside. I, Sergeant Colby Drope, requested a phone ping on the last known phone number associated with Jessica Kemp. Dispatch was unable to conduct the phone ping due to phone service provider being based in Canada. Deputies conducted a search of the surrounding wooded area but were unable to locate any individuals. Additionally, deputies patrolled all vehicle accessible areas around Lake Ashball. However, no contact was made. That is the end of Sergeant Drope's narrative from his incident on May 9th, but it was typed on May 15th. The next narrative in this report is by Deputy Jenna Owen. It reads as follows. On May 11th, 2025, at approximately 1848 hours, I, Deputy Jenna Owen, initiated contact with an individual at the Lake Ashball campground. Upon further investigation, the individual was identified as Redacted, who was observed walking around an abandoned vehicle at the campsite. Redacted was also noted to be driving a red Ford Escape with an Arkansas license plate, open parentheses, ATV90C, close parentheses, which was parked further up the campground. When questioned about his presence at the campground, Redacted explained that he was in the area searching for Jessica Kemp and picking up trash around the campsite. He stated that he and Kemp were friends and expressed concern for her well-being, mentioning having a bad feeling about her being alone in the woods. I advised Redacted to contact the Greene County Sheriff's Department if he encounters Kemp or has any information regarding her whereabouts. That is the end of Deputy Jenna Owen's narrative. The next narrative is by Deputy Brian Tillman, and it reads as follows. On 5/5/25, I, Deputy Brian Tillman, responded to the campground on Green 101 Road. Dispatch received a call from Jessica Kemp stating that she could hear someone screaming help and is trapped under her car. Kemp also stated that there was urine in the rear floorboard. I arrived and spoke to Kemp. Kemp stated that she was camping alone and began hearing someone yelling for help. As I was speaking with Kemp, she was currently still hearing the person screaming. I explained to Kemp that I did not hear the person screaming, but I did check underneath the car to ensure that no one was there. Kemp's car had multiple parts disassembled and removed from the car. She stated that she was trying to gain access to underneath the car. Kemp stated she recently used methamphetamine, but at a later time, Kemp stated she has not used any drugs. She also made the comment that she recently stopped taking mental health medication. Kim, K-I-M, which is clearly a typo, stated that she would be in contact with her physician to check on her medications. Nothing further, Deputy Brian Tillman. So I read you the three narratives. Part of what's confusing is, even though everything was typed on the 15th, Drupp's narrative came on the 9th of May. Owen's narrative came on the 11th of May. And Tillman's narrative was from an incident that happened on the 5th of May. Each one of these incidents, specifically Deputy Brian Tillman's contact with her, should have been its own report. So what we'll do is start with his narrative that I just read you last. We're going to flip the order and we're going to go back to that as the first situation. So he tells us in his narrative that while physically in the presence of Jessica Paige Kemp, she is at least having audible hallucinations. He also explains that while standing in the presence of Jessica Paige Kemp, who is having hallucinations, allegedly taking her vehicle apart, and is presently located on a public campground within Greene County, she tells him that she has used methamphetamine. From a probable cause standpoint, if it were absolutely necessary in order to get her a mental health screening or evaluation, he had more than enough probable cause to arrest her for public intoxication. Plenty of people have been cited and arrested and booked in for public intoxication in Greene County by the Greene County Sheriff's Office. That, in my opinion, as a former patrol officer and a former detective, was the absolute last resort that he would have needed in order to make sure that she got the help that she deserved to get. So, for one, Paragould Emergency Dispatch, because of the nature of Jessica Paige Kemp's original call, dispatched an ambulance to the area. Deputy Brian Tillman arrived there first, realized that there actually was no entrapment of a person in or underneath a car, so he canceled the ambulance. That's not necessarily in and of itself the wrong thing to do from a resource management standpoint. However, the minute that he starts talking to her and realizing that she's having hallucinations, it would have been too easy to ask the ambulance to turn around and continue back out to the campsite so that qualified medical personnel could evaluate her. That never happened. So, one of the things that we have come across multiple times in this investigation is Sheriff Snyder explaining that Deputy Brian Tillman has what's called CIT training, and he's an instructor of CIT training. CIT is, there's a couple different names for it, but critical incident training is the most common. Essentially, that training is designed to teach officers how to recognize people who are having mental health crisis whether it's drug-induced, whether it's medically induced, whatever it is. It's teaching officers how to recognize those crises, how to respond to them appropriately, and the ultimate goal is how to make sure that the person in crisis receives the help that they deserve to receive. I don't think that it would have taken somebody who's a CIT instructor to understand that a 32-year-old, otherwise healthy female having hallucinations is a sign of an altered mental status. Not only does he claim that she says she used methamphetamine, but he says that she made an abrupt stop of her mental health medication, which should be a red flag to almost anyone, especially a trained law enforcement officer, that this is a serious, potentially dangerous mental health crisis. Instead, Deputy Brian Tillman takes her answer of, "I'll call my physician later," as sufficient. He doesn't place her on a mental health hold. He doesn't call the ambulance that was already en route to that area. So it's not like he's even calling them out of their regular station. They were probably not very far away when they turned around. He doesn't call them out to have a professional medical, like a paramedic, evaluate her. So when you start talking about how the ball was dropped, there's some major issues with just his narrative alone, right? A big thing that you run into in law enforcement is, we're not going to play Monday morning quarterback. How are we supposed to get any better and raise our own standards if we're not evaluating the places that we've come up short? That's a problem. The other problem is Deputy Brian Tillman was dispatched out to Lake Ashball, where he made contact with a person who was having a mental health crisis, regardless of what it may have been causing it. And he bothered to do no report whatsoever until he added his supplemental narrative 10 days later on the 15th of May. I don't know what their policy is for report writing in Greene County, but it seems like it probably should be adjusted. That should have at least been an information report. So that was on the 5th of May, 2025. On the 9th of May is when Sergeant Colby Drobe went to the area. So let's talk about his narrative. Sergeant Drobe, hopefully I'm saying his name correctly, was doing everything he was supposed to do. Up until the point that they just said we can't find anything and left, and then didn't do a narrative. He says in his narrative that they were aware that Deputy Tillman had had contact with her. So they were aware, after finding her vehicle completely unsecured, campsite in disarray, and her not physically being present there and having no other means of transportation, he was aware that when Brian Tillman made contact with her, she was having a mental health crisis. I think it was those circumstances that prompted Sergeant Drobe to attempt a phone ping on Jessica Paige Kemp's phone. So let's talk about that for a second. There are specific and clear extenuating circumstances to attempting to geolocate someone or their cell phone without a warrant. You have to be able to articulate why you believe this person's safety is at risk, serious bodily harm and or death. I personally think, given the circumstances that Sergeant Drobe was facing, requesting to do the phone ping was completely acceptable. I think that the situation did meet those exigent circumstances, And I think that Sergeant Trope recognized that. Where I have a problem is if you've recognized those circumstances, those exigent circumstances, that you're trying to locate someone without a warrant, why is it an acceptable answer to just drive out of the area when we're unsuccessful? Why was there no other response coordinated at that time? And moreover, why did you attempt to do a warrantless geolocation of someone and you didn't do a report on it until 6 days later? That's not the way we're supposed to operate. That's a big problem. So again, that was on the 9th of May, 2025. 2 days later, on May 11th, in 2025, Deputy Jenna Owens goes out to the campsite. This narrative doesn't tell us whether she went out there to follow up on the Jessica Paige Kemp case or if this was just part of Deputy Owens' regular patrol. Maybe she was driving by and just saw something and figured out what was going on. Now, considering she works on shift with these other two, I'm fairly certain that she was probably aware of the circumstances and maybe she went back to check. She tells us that when she's going out here to check for Jessica Paige Kemp or changes at the campsite of a call that she is most certainly probably aware of the circumstances on, she runs in to a white male who in this report is redacted. Obviously, we know who that white male is. I can also tell you that her reporting of the tag ATV90C, Adam Tom Victor 90 Charles, is the wrong tag. It seems like she got some letters or numbers switched in that tag. But anyway, she goes out to this campsite, most likely aware of these circumstances. And she runs into an unknown white male who happens to be looking for a person that at that time wasn't actually reported missing. This white male even says to Deputy Owens, I'm sorry, it's Deputy Owen, there's no S. He mentioned having a bad feeling about her alone in the woods. How did he know she was alone in the woods? Seems like a pretty reasonable question for a sheriff's deputy to ask, especially given the suspicious circumstances in which she found this white male. She doesn't annotate in her report that she told this white male to stop taking items from the campsite, which probably has something to do with why we physically went and recovered some of Jessica Paige Kemp's items from this individual. Quite a few of them, actually. Deputy Owen also tells this male, he's not, at this point, according to her narrative, he's not under arrest, he's not in trouble, tells this male that if he encounters Kemp or has any information regarding her whereabouts, he needs to contact the Greene County Sheriff's Office. On May 11th, a sheriff's deputy of the Greene County Sheriff's Office was concerned enough about the whereabouts and safety of Jessica Paige Kemp to tell a civilian that if he has any of that information or finds out any information about her whereabouts, he needs to contact the Greene County Sheriff's Office. But again, not concerned enough to do a report on the 11th only added a narrative on the 15th. Also not concerned enough, I guess, maybe to pass it up the chain and get a larger response. There was no welfare check done at her registered address. No one called family or anybody to try to find her whereabouts, yet a sheriff's deputy is advising a civilian that if they know where this person is, they need to provide that information. That's pretty concerning. Another issue, and maybe it'll be its own video, is during an interview with the mother and brother of Jessica Paige Kemp, Greene County Sheriff Detective Captain Rhonda Thomas was adamant they had no clue about this until the 15th. They did not know about this to the 15th. CID didn't get involved until the 15th, almost from a defensive standpoint. Well, the other report we have from Jonesboro talks about both an investigator and a patrol officer speaking to Captain Rhonda Thomas on the phone on the 14th about a grid search that was apparently being conducted at Lake Ashball concerning the whereabouts of Jessica Paige Kemp. There are a litany of failures in this entire case. The entire purpose of this video is to raise awareness about the case, how the case was handled, and the fact that the Second Judicial Prosecuting Attorney's Office and the Greene County Sheriff's Office are refusing to do absolutely anything to communicate with us at Presidium or the family. I come from law enforcement and I understand protecting the integrity of your case by not providing any and all information. That's a pretty important part of an investigation. Likewise, I've been extremely clear that I'm not seeking any details of the case. It is not a two-way street. If our investigation finds something that I believe the Greene County Sheriff's Office can benefit from, we send it to them. And that's pretty much everything. Because there's no communication, I don't want to assume they can't benefit. So I pretty much just send them everything that we come across. All we are asking for is, what is the status of the case? Is this an active criminal investigation or not? And apparently it's going to take the general public, social media, to ask this question enough times that hopefully we can get an answer. If the answer is no, they do not have an active criminal investigation into Jessica Paige Kemp's case, then we will proceed with our investigation. But in order to try to protect the integrity of their investigation, we have slowed everything down until we get an answer to that question. So hopefully this video gives some clarity to so many people who've been so supportive to the family in trying to find answers and seek justice for Jessica Paige Kemp. If anyone has any questions that weren't answered in this video, and I don't answer them in your comments, it's because it's information that we're not going to release for the same reason. Thank you all for your support. Thank you for taking the time to watch this.